So part two, picking up where I left off there, we want to allow some scaffolding of their native language. So of course we are going to allow a student to slowly translate. Give them time. So number 6, look for culturally unique vocabulary. An item such as a pizza or t-shirt, where we have a correlation. So we know it's a pizza, they know it's pizza. It's what is their word for it? Again, going back to how I mentioned a certain wheel, an automobile wheel. We can also use partially completed sentences and handouts. So instead of asking a student, instead of writing something on the board and having them jot it all down, or instead of having a presentation where we deliver a lesson and you have the student take notes, although we could allow them to take notes in their own language, but in order to foster an interest in English and help them in their learning process of English, what we can do is we can have a handout with most of the sentence complete, missing key words, so it allows them to read and fill in that word in English. That would assist them. So we're meeting the curriculum as well as assisting them in English. We can also pre-teach. So, and this is something that we've been taught at Brock, and something that most of us should be doing anyways, but pre-teach. So what's going on tomorrow? Allow sort of an introductory. We want to recap what we did yesterday. We want to give a lesson today. We could recap a little bit of what we did today, but also what are we doing tomorrow? I'll give them a heads up. We can learn their cultural background. As an example, now culturally, and again going back to my experience when I was at Eastwood with the Somali family coming in, parent-teacher interview. Culture was that the mother would be behind the father. I extend a greeting to the father. The mother didn't extend her hand. Culturally, it's not accepted. It's not acceptable for me as a male teacher or just another male to be shaking his wife's hand. So these are sort of things. These are little cultural differences, if you will, and you need to know those so that you don't insult somebody, that you don't make them feel awkward, make yourself feel awkward. Just learn their cultural background. And similarly, with a student in your classroom, you want to be very careful as to what you say or how you present yourself. Don't make the child, number 10, don't make the child speak for their entire culture. Make it personal to the child. What are their experiences? If a child is from Mexico, they are not speaking for all of Mexico. It's their idea. Think about it in terms of ourselves as someone from Ontario as opposed to someone from the East Coast, someone from the West Coast, somebody from Northern Canada. I certainly couldn't speak on behalf of somebody from British Columbia or Nova Scotia or Quebec. So extend that same latitude to your students. So if they are from a country, they are not a representative of that country. Just allow them to speak to their experiences, and that's it. Number 11, keep it light, not too serious. Okay. Number 12, always take them serious. So although you want to represent it, a child's going to make mistakes. A student is going to make mistakes. There's no sense in making it a big deal of that mistake. Keep it light. Highlight your mistakes. Right? Not too serious. We all make mistakes. But when a child or a student is coming to you and they want to learn, you have to make sure that you take them serious. Right? Don't dismiss their ideas or their thoughts just because they can't articulate them as well, perhaps as an English-speaking student. My next resource was Kaplan, and this is 6 essential strategies for teaching English language learners. And I retrieved this from edutopia.org. Now, similar to Gonzalez, Kaplan condenses and offers strategies for teaching ELL students. While there's certainly some crossover, the main strategy that was pointed out was the need for educators to speak slowly and increase waiting time. So this was the key idea that was brought, or that I got from this resource. So there's some crossover, of course. I mean, Gonzalez offered 12 steps. Kaplan offers 6 strategies. There is crossovers, but this one particular point was key, and that was, again, educators to speak slowly and increase waiting time. So processing time should be afforded to students who need to internally translate the words and phrases into their own languages, compile an answer, translate back to English, and then speak. So as you can imagine, you're hearing something in English. You need to translate that to your own language. Formulate an answer. Translate that back to English, and now all of a sudden have the courage to say this to a class. So this takes time, and that's something that perhaps that we don't think of. Where we're processing in English, our inputs in English, we're processing in English, and our output is in English. But allowing time, recognizing that it takes time for the students to do this translation, and allowing them the time. So speak slowly, let them understand. Kaplan also introduces a strategy that involves Google Classroom. So this again is key. We want to have that communication with the parents, and you'll see that later on. I do touch on another resource that cites communication with parents. So here you can introduce Google Translate. So the student could be introduced a topic in their own native language and encouraged. So pre-teaching, we can say this is what we're doing tomorrow, and the term is in their language. They can go home, research that subject a little bit, and then come back to school the next day with almost a fresher perspective on whatever is going to be taught. So that at that point, that translation from English to their native language becomes a lot easier to learn, and their main focus, it becomes the topic rather than the language. So Dizon cites understanding by design, the way I understand it. This was one of the best pieces of feedback that I got from Sakai, from the feedback forum, and I specifically reached out and looked for some resources about backward design and understanding by design. So Dizon uses it and says that this is a perfect teaching tool for ELL students. And while some might argue that understanding by design is a new technique, the concept has already been in practice for quite some time. Teachers use the curriculum to structure their courses, if we look at it that way. So we have our curriculum book. We have that book that's put out by the ministry in Ontario, and we use that in order to develop our lessons, to develop our courses. That in itself is understanding by design. That is backward design. So essentially, we're already doing this. In tech, we have a perfect opportunity where we are hands-on. So an exemplar final product could be used. Transportation, understanding by design, can be successfully employed within a variety of units. We have engines that can be dismantled. Braking and cooling systems can physically be brought into the cooling system or into the classroom, where students can dissect the components. We can lay them all out, and as a result, they can have a better understanding, right? So understanding by design works perfectly, works very well in tech programs. Myself, with my experience in technology, it works perfect. So this is a great resource for any tech teacher dealing with ELL students. Understand by design, a backward design, a tactile feel, and that's a great resource. And my fourth resource was by Hanif. This is a research paper by Rabina Hanif, and she is, I suppose, a student at OISE at the University of Toronto. So her main focus was increasing the parental involvement of ELL students in our schools. So as you can imagine, with ELL students, sometimes there's certain socio-economic issues where a lot of these, the immigrants are often maybe working multiple jobs. and the language barrier. So in order, and we know if there's a strong network at home where that fosters learning, those students will come to school better prepared. So in her research, she identifies the importance of involving parents to support ELL students. She offers insight into various languages, cultures, socioeconomic factors that contribute to ELL students' struggles. So Hanif, what she did was she interviewed educators and asked for their experiences in teaching ELL students, as well as their parental involvement, and attempts to draw parallels between ELL and English-speaking students. Interesting conclusions can be drawn from, do you find it challenging to communicate with the parents of ELL students? There's multiple questions. So Hanif, what she did was, in her resources, or in her analysis, she has all the questions that were asked of the teachers. So it was a great resource. All right, questions like this can offer the reader simple yet highly constructive suggestions on whether communication is important and how best to go about it. Google Classroom, or not Google Classroom, Google Translate comes in well. If notes are being sent home to parents, if the child is an ELL student, chances are that the parents are not going to understand a note sent home in English. So as a result, we as educators need to be aware of that, cognizant of that we should translate that, understand the language, understand the culture, translate that note, through Google Translate, through colleagues perhaps in the school, through other students perhaps in the school that are a little bit more proficient in English. And we can send those notes home, right? So literature summary. So all 4 literary works brought unique points or views that allowed us to really tie them together. Many of the early stages strategies provided by Gonzalez and Kaplan overlap with key concepts emerging. Show interest, genuine interest in your students, and their chances of success will improve. So as new educators, we're faced with lots of challenges, lots and lots of challenges, and these are compounded by the growing and ever diversified population in Canada, and specifically in Southern Ontario, where most of us will likely work, students of Brock tech students. So research is something that we're going to have to take seriously. We have to research how to teach ELL students. We have to research the students that are particular to our school board, to our schools even. And this is something that is not changing and will likely increase. As I noted, in Waterloo region, we are 27% of the students, again, secondary or elementary and secondary, 27% of those students have been identified as ELL. And although I didn't do research into areas of Hamilton, Peel, Halton, I can imagine that the numbers are likely larger in Peel, Toronto, and those regions as we get closer to the GTA. So this is something certainly that we need to be aware of. But a lot of the strategies do crossovers. The studies that were done was looking at different countries. So United States. So in California, Texas, they had Spanish students coming in from Mexico. North Carolina and Oregon had different students. Again, mainly Spanish. But are the teaching techniques any different from teaching a Spanish student as opposed to teaching a Somali student or Quebec? Likely not. You have to have the same strategies are in place, even though the languages and the cultures might change a little bit. The strategies stay the same. So I'm running out of time on this one as well. So I look forward to seeing you in part 3.